Okay, we got it going. Hello all. I'm Les Myers, the Executive Director of the White Tank Mountains Conservancy. On behalf of our Board of Directors, our city partners, our corporate sponsors and volunteers, and our speakers who have shared their knowledge and their professions and passions to the commitment of this incredible opportunity to keep the White Tank Mountains wild and preserve this natural environment and for generations to come and for all of us. It's our intent to show by collaboration and cooperation, we can responsibly manage this incredible growth and preserve the economic value and quality of life that these mountains provide to us all. So welcome all and take it away, Anya.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for the part 2 of the 3-part series of the White Tank Mountains Regional Connectivity Initiative. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. On behalf of CASCA, I just want to say how excited and honored we are to be co-hosting this series with the White Tank Mountains Conservancy. This type of work is just so encouraging and exciting to see in our region. When CASCA came together to create the Regional Open Space Strategy from 2016 to 2018, habitat connectivity and regional collaboration were some of the priorities that we identified. And this Regional Connectivity Initiative embodies that kind of work that we envisioned happening in the region that is going to take us forward with the solutions that we need in order for us to embody and to create that regional connectivity that we envision that will not only help create communities that thrive, but also protect the ecological benefits that we learned about in part 1 of the series. So again, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm so happy to introduce the MC for tonight. Her name is Sintra Hoffman, and she's going to be guiding us throughout the evening. Sintra Hoffman is the CEO of Westmark, the Western Maricopa Coalition, a public-private partnership of the 15 municipalities, business community, and the educational sector across the West Valley. She is actively involved across the West Valley, including serving on the White Tank Mountains Conservancy Board of Directors. Sorry, tonight is just a tongue twister She's an avid hiker and has the White Tanks as one of her favorite places to enjoy and recreate in. So I'll let Sintra take it away. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here. I'm excited to share a little bit about my favorite topic, the West Valley. And what Westmark's role is and how we work with all of our partners, including the White Tank Mountains Conservancy. So again, Sintra Hoffman, I'm the president and CEO for Westmark. And Westmark is an organization that was created 31 years ago to really put the West Valley on the map, to organize all of the key industry sector, or the key sectors being government, business, education, and nonprofits. And so we really are the hub of the West Valley and what's happening in the West Valley. So if you're growing, if you're investing, if you're trying to make a difference in the West Valley, usually the first place they come to is Westmark, and so we're excited about that. On the city side, I'd like to point out that our membership includes every single West Valley city. So that includes, I have my map over here. Let me just pull that up so I make sure I don't forget anyone's name here. So that includes Avondale, Buckeye, El Mirage, Gila Bend, Glendale, Goodyear, Litchfield Park, two Maricopa County communities, Peoria, Surprise, Tolleson, Wickenburg, and Youngtown. And I see that because people are really surprised at how vast the West Valley is. Our boundaries are roughly between I-17 going all the way west to Buckeye, north to Wickenburg, and then south to Gila Bend. So that's a 3,000 square mile region that we take in. And the population within that region is 1.7 million residents. We're projected to grow to over 2 million by 2030. And I can't wait to see the census numbers when they're completely finalized, because I know that we've made a huge dent in moving forward. Buckeye is, as many of you may know, the fastest growing city, over 50,000 in the nation. That's pretty huge. So to have this asset in Buckeye, to look at what's happening in the West Valley and to see how all of the communities are coming together, Surprise, Goodyear, all of the West Valley communities are just really booming at this point. And they're really coming together and working really well together to make sure that our voice is heard collectively. I've shared with our executive committee at Westmark that we are right now a region onto our own. That is a little bit of a dangerous thing because we don't want to separate from the greater mission of Phoenix metro area. But if you look at what's happening in the West Valley and the numbers that we have, we are larger than major metro areas that we compete with. And our role at Westmark is to position the West Valley for economic development growth. So a lot of the jobs that you see that are coming in, we have targeted industries that we're working towards growing, and we work with all of the city's economic development teams to really understand where the cities are focused, where Greater Phoenix Economic Council, GPEC, is focused, and where the ACA, Arizona Commerce Authority, is focused. So we're all in alignment, saying the same message to attract businesses in these targeted industries to the West Valley. And a key thing that we learned several years ago is that the number one thing that companies look for when they're choosing where they're going to locate is having a talented workforce in place. And that is 46% of companies say that that's the number one thing that they look for in making a decision to locate. So we know that, and then the other thing that comes into play, obviously, cost of living and so on, but then quality of life. And that's really where my passion for my work with the Conservancy comes into play, is I think together we are looking at the demographic that's moving to the West Valley, the type of people the type of recreation amenities that they're looking for, and making sure that we're here to preserve that and have that great outdoor space for folks to recreate in. And then again, as a tourism tool, making sure that we're promoting that. You just bounce back a little bit. So I want to share some demographics with you because I'm big on the numbers if you haven't been able to tell yet. One of the things that we really focus on is not only our population, which is again 1.7 million residents, but our household income. Our household income is on the rise. Our average household income is $78,000. I'm sorry, 75. My slide keeps popping in and out here. 75,556. And that is an average of that 3,000 square mile area. When you drill down into specific communities, you're looking at average household incomes within those concentrated areas of 100 to 130,000 annually. Verrado is one of those communities. In Peoria, Vistancia is one of those communities, Litchfield Park, and so on. But we have a lot of wealth in the West Valley, and we're really kind of a quiet wealth community. We don't wear it on our sleeves. We're kind of real people, if you will. So we also promote the median home price, because once upon a time we were a very affordable community, and many people drove to qualify and they landed in the West Valley. But what they discovered is what a tremendous community and quality of life they have here, and they've moved up in their homes, they've upskilled in their workplaces and so on, and they've raised their kids here. And that's me. My daughter is now 26 years old, and when I moved to the West Valley, she was 5. So today we have our population is also a lot younger than previously indicated, and that's my dog, who loves to hike in Skyline Park, by the way. So when we look at our workforce age, our average workforce, the number of residents that are workforce age is 63% of our population, which again, many people don't realize how young the West Valley actually is. Our now median age in the West Valley, and these are brand new numbers, and we're really excited about them, is 34.8 years old. That 0.8 is really important to me. And I say that I never compare the East Valley to the West Valley, but I think when it comes to the average age or the median age, it's important to point out that in the East Valley, inclusive of the ASU Tempe campus, the median age is 36 years old. So they are a little bit older than we are. And that's, I think, a big thing when companies are looking to locate, because again, they're looking to make sure that they have an up and coming workforce and great education partners to make sure that folks are educated in the industries that we're targeted on. So another one of the key areas that we promote is the major attractions and the quality of life that we have. So we know that we have a talented workforce. We know that they're leaving and they're working elsewhere, and that's again a big focus is to try to attract those jobs to keep them local. 38% of the healthcare workers in all of Maricopa County live in the West Valley. So we have more than a third of the share of some key industries. 34%, excuse me, in advanced business services, which is finance and insurance, and then 28% in manufacturing. So we absolutely have the workforce that's needed in this area. So at Westmark, a few years ago, we said, okay, great, we know we have the talent. Well, why would they live here? I talked to you a little bit about the numbers of the average home price and so on. But it's a pretty cool place to live. You know, we don't realize the amenities that we actually have. We're clearly the sports capital with all of the major, with NFL, the hockey team, Phoenix Raceway, NASCAR, and obviously 9 spring training teams train here in the West Valley. But we also have new things on the horizon, like the Desert Diamond Casino. They built a facility or a casino on the Loop 101. They're expanding onto the Loop 303. So all of these amenities and nightlife and things like that are happening are really important to folks. But as was mentioned, I am an avid hiker, and I think that again, when we look at the demographic that's moving to the West Valley, we see that there's a lot of people that are really, they're outdoor enthusiasts, and they're moving here because of a lot of the outdoors recreation and opportunities that we have. So again, that is really where my heart lies with one of my favorite parks. And I say this all the time, is Skyline Park, and it's 10 minutes door to door from my house. So I love that about it. So with that, I think I will, are we open for questions at this point, or? Okay, I guess we're gonna move on. So the other thing before I transition to the other speakers today is one of the things that, and I kind of mentioned this in my initial remarks, is how the West Valley community supports each other. We really truly are a very cohesive and supportive community, and you see that from the elected leaders throughout the West Valley to our residents. It's just, we're open, we're a very diverse community, we're open to diversity, we're open to newcomers. We're seeing a lot of California migrating to the West Valley. We're an hour closer than other areas to their home, and so it makes sense for them to locate here. We're engaged, we talk to each other, we support each other, and we grow together. And I will tell you that when I first moved to Arizona 22 years ago, and I worked for the city of Surprise at the time, we were all pretty competitive. We were all growing rapidly, and we were all competing for retail projects and all of that. I've really seen a huge transition in that, to how the elected leaders, how the city employees, how everyone is really coming together and working together. And like I say, that transcends down to our residents. So that's what I have for you on the overview of Westmark and what we focus on. And at this time, I would like to introduce our first speaker, who is Dana Warnicki. And Dana has many years of experience, a huge background in conservation with multiple programs and government agencies. She was with the Arizona Game and Fish Department for 21 years, working in the fisheries branch and Region 6 Habitat Evaluation and Land Program. She graduated from ASU with a bachelor's in environmental resources. So I will turn it over to you, Dana.
Thank you, and good evening, everybody. And it's exciting to be back here for night 2 of our 3-part speaker series. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I'm going to turn my video off while I present just to save on bandwidth. I just want to confirm you can see my screen. Somebody just give me a nod. All
Yep.
right. Excellent. So I am going to kick it off tonight with just some brief highlights on the changing landscape and urban expansion in Western Maricopa County. Last week during session 1 of this series, we focused on the natural resource values of the White Tank Mountains region. Tonight, we'll be looking into the future at what will be a changing landscape for wildlife and people in the West Valley. As Sintra mentioned, we have a lot of growth happening in the West Valley cities. From a regional perspective, the West Valley cities of Peoria, Surprise, Buckeye, and Goodyear are all poised for significant urban growth and expansion. The Maricopa Association of Governments predicts populations ranging between 250 and 450,000 residents for each of these cities by 2050. However, Buckeye and Surprise lead the pack. And in fact, each of these cities are predicted to have between 400 and 500,000 residents by the year 2055. Tonight, we will learn more about the future of these two cities, and as well as 2 regional parks that will be surrounded by these 2 cities at some point in the future. But first, I would like to give you a glimpse of the future with a couple of maps that were developed for our story map for the Regional Connectivity Initiative. And these maps will give you a glimpse of the magnitude of potential change that we will be seeing in the future. This first map illustrates planned future land use as approved by the cities of Buckeye and Surprise. And we're concentrating on these 2 cities in the maps because they are the 2 that will most directly impact and surround the White Tank Mountains. And so this map illustrates future land use approved by the cities of Buckeye and Surprise, and it's illustrative of each of their respective general plans. And these are the plans that will guide future development. Based on these plans, at future build out, the mountains will essentially be surrounded by, let me just scroll down a little bit here. The mountains will essentially be surrounded by residential neighborhoods, which are shown in yellow in the 2 cities. Also master plan communities shown in brown for Buckeye and part of the yellow in the city of Surprise. Also, we have business, commerce, and activity employment centers, which are shown in red, gray, and a couple different shades of purple on this map. Planned open space is shown in dark green on this map. And just to zoom in briefly here, you can see based on these plans that there are a few desert wash corridors that the city of Surprise has identified and planned for as open space that will connect the mountains to outlying open space in natural lands. But that's really it for the White Tanks. In essence, they will be pretty much surrounded by urban development, and there won't be any continuous open space connections at this point in the plans to these outlying natural lands. Okay, next I would like to move on to a second map for you. The next map illustrates plans for future transportation infrastructure. And again, there's a lot that's going to be happening in the future. First, I'd like to start by just sliding across to now. And essentially what you see is all these fine squiggly purple lines are the existing transportation infrastructure in the Phoenix metro area. And excuse me, you can see that there's still very little infrastructure that has been developed here on the west side of the White Tank Mountains, extending out into the outlying natural lands. But this will change in the future, along with these cities and all the urban plans that I just shared. We have this transportation infrastructure of a whole network of freeways, parkways, major and minor arterials, as well as a bunch of supporting collectors and local streets that aren't even shown on this map. Zoom in a bit. You can also see that the proposed Interstate 11, which is this nice bright purple line coming down, will transect this region as well. So we hope that these two maps help you to envision the magnitude of change that we will witness in the future. Collectively, these West Valley cities and others nearby have a desire to work together on strategies to conserve the natural resources, the natural heritage of Western Maricopa County. To do that, we must, through collaboration, address the connectivity imperative facing the White Tank Mountains ecosystem. We need to also plan for future ecological connectivity. We need connected natural lands to sustain regional biodiversity. And in the process, we have this incredible opportunity to enhance the quality of life in the region and contribute to the economic prosperity. So with that, I would like to invite you to learn more about our booming cities out here in the West Valley. You can use this QR code to access our recently launched story map. And on behalf of the White Tank Mountain Conservancy, I want to thank you for being with us tonight. And I'm going to go ahead and stop my screen share and pass the torch to the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dana. So our next speaker with us this evening is Councilmember Chris Judd from the city of Surprise.
I believe Adam Copeland's going next.
Oh, okay. I was waiting for someone to correct me on that. I felt like I had something out of order here. Yes, I do. Okay. So our next speaker is impersonating Councilmember Judd is Adam Copeland with the city of Buckeye. And Adam has been with the city for a number of years. He is the Deputy Director for Planning for Buckeye. He has over 20 years of experience with municipalities in the planning realm with the city of Tempe, Surprise, and now Buckeye. He has worked on projects, environmental related projects such as the Rio Reimagine, El Rio, and of course, Buckeye's general plan, which require a lot of coordination with many government agencies and community groups. And it's great to have Adam. Adam and I actually worked together at the city of Surprise years ago. And so we kind of go way back, and he is definitely someone who is concerned and works hard towards making sure that our natural environments are preserved. So Adam, take it away.
Thank you, Centra. I appreciate it. And for those of you that don't know, Centra actually knows my father as well, so I can't get away with anything without her keeping an eye on me. Before I get started, can you see my screen? Okay, great. So yeah, thank you everybody for this opportunity, and thank you, Les, Jamie. This is great to have this opportunity to talk about Buckeye and some of the initiatives we're working on. But more importantly, our discussion today is focused around our land use, circulation, as well as some of the initiatives that we're working through on a wildlife corridor project. And so, as I mentioned before, we did adopt a wildlife corridor best practices guide. That was a big milestone for us as a city that we'll go over here in a little bit. So before we get into some of those exciting details, Buckeye is approximately 640 square miles. That's our planning area. You can see on the slide, if you compare us to City of Phoenix, it's very interesting that we're very similar in shape. But as we build out, we're actually going to be bigger than Phoenix by land area and possibly population. We're over 90,000 population now. And if you count the county islands within our planning area, we're well over 100,000. We've currently had projects that have come in over the last 15 or so years where we have approximately 300,000 currently zoned and entitled dwelling units in the city. That if those were all built out today, that would be close to 1 million people. But as these master plan communities are moving forward, those will start filling in over the next 20 or so years. If you took Buckeye, it's about 50 miles north-south and about 23 miles east-west. If you put Buckeye on its side, if you are familiar with the Buckeye City Hall or even the White Tank, if you look at the White Tank Park, Skyline Park, if you flip Buckeye on its side, it's like driving from the Skyline Park all the way to East Mesa. That's how long Buckeye is. That just shows you the mass of land that we have to plan and coordinate. You can fit Paris, Philadelphia, and Boston in our planning area with room to spare. I'm not going to say we're going to look like Paris, Philadelphia, or Boston, but it's a good exhibit to show. This is just a map that we did just a little over a year ago that identifies some of our recent residential activity. There's about 21,000 plus lots that are currently in the platting stages, which is they're going through subdivision planning, preliminary planning. And that, again, if you equate it to single family homes and population, that's about 60,000 people that are currently in the planning stages. So that just shows you there's a lot of activity, a lot of growth. And that's why, as Centra mentioned, we are the fastest growing city in the United States, populations over 50,000. Buckeye does have 26 master plan communities. And as I mentioned before, there's about 300,000 entitled lots. Some of these communities, when I say master plan communities, it's just hard to put it into perspective. Some of these are the size of small cities. Here's an example. This is Douglas Ranch that's located more in our northwest segment of Buckeye. Recently, the Howard Hughes Incorporation did purchase Douglas Ranch for just a measly $600 million. I don't know what that would look like in my checking account, but I'm sure that would be pretty exciting. But in any event, Douglas Ranch, if you put City of Tempe and fit it in Douglas Ranch, it would fit. This shows you how big our master plan communities are in Buckeye. So really, we're planning cities within a city. We're going to have about 26 of these big communities that we have to plan. I did want to go back a little bit. You can see the exhibit that Dana showed that had a lot of the brown location that identified where these communities are going. There's a lot more detail within those brown areas, as you can see on the slide. A lot of washes, a lot of open space areas, corridors, and with our goal of as these start to connect like puzzle pieces, we want to make sure they connect seamlessly, hopefully to connect the White Tanks to the Belmonts and other areas. This is my favorite slide. We have a number of what's called zombie subdivisions. It is Halloween. We're getting close, so I thought it would be appropriate. But we have about 16,000 lots that have been platted and graded that over the last several years have been filling in with residential. They were dormant from the recession and they're all coming back to life. Those are the most popular subdivisions so far, our zombie subdivisions. Dana identified a little bit of our transportation plan. Our transportation master plan was adopted about a year and a half ago. This exhibit here illustrates the significant amount of planning of our future roadway network. And you can see on the far west side, we have the I-11 corridor. This identified those 3 alignments that I-11 was looking at, north-south through Buckeye, as well as east-west as it goes further into the Goodyear and southern areas. So that's a big corridor that we're tracking, monitoring, along with much of our transportation network as some of these master plan communities move forward. You may also remember the Belmont project that's south of Douglas Ranch, about in this area. You probably saw the news that the Bill Gates Foundation had a stake in that. And so you have 2 massive projects that are the size of small cities that will have a major freeway corridor going through them with the Hassayampa River that's adjacent to them and the Belmont Mountains that are nearby. So with all that growth becomes a lot of responsibility. And so the city is really focused on being good stewards of our land, doing the best we can to coordinate with developers, home builders, private partnerships, public agencies, as we start to build out in our planning area. A large portion of our city is open space, floodplain, and sensitive alluvial fans. We have a large majority of BLM lands. And I think if you look at our entire planning area, about 30% of it is open space. So there's quite a bit of opportunity as we move forward and grow. We also have areas like the Gila River that have a lot of wildlife activity. This is an exhibit that identifies what this Gila River will possibly look like over time as we restore it. We're working with partnerships all around the adjacent cities along the river. Westmec has been great. I actually miss meeting at Westmec. Century, you guys have been great accommodating us in some of our Rio Reimagine meetings. But with ASU, with all the partnering cities, just a massive undertaking with a collaborative, a charter, and a number of different initiatives as we plan our Gila River corridor. That's also a very sensitive environment to wildlife. And I could tell you, with the partnership we have on Gila, it's just as strong with the White Tank Mountain Conservancy and the partnerships with those folks. Our general plan was approved a few years ago, and we had about 80% voter approval. One of our main elements in our general plan was wildlife corridors. Wildlife corridors is identified as a study area that included a number of different natural areas, washes, and a lot of the similar open spaces that Dana pulled up on her map that included some of these alluvial fans, washes, and known wildlife corridors that Arizona Game and Fish provided us some good information on. As part of that, we created a wildlife corridor best practice guide, and it was a very focused and sensitive topic with the home builders, along with a lot of the private property owners throughout the city. A lot of what we found through this exercise in creating these guidelines is that we found that economic development is key. There's a lot of potential for wildlife corridor preservation. There's property value increase that we found in some studies around the United States, premium lot opportunities, as well as potential infrastructure savings with keeping natural washes versus man-made washes. But not to get into too much detail, we just went through quite a few of these areas and priorities with different partners as we adopted that plan. Some key takeaways, mule deer is a focal species within the Buckeye area. Gila and Hassayampa rivers, as we mentioned, are major drainage corridors that we're going to have a lot of stakeholder involvement in as some of these roads, major freeways, and other infrastructures cross these areas as we start to consider wildlife opportunities. We also, Bob Weisner will mention a little bit later, our concept on rivers to ridges with mitigation impacts to the natural resource within the Buckeye planning area and a number of the different partnerships. I know Bob will go over a little bit more later in the presentation. I'm just going to run through some of our exhibits as part of our wildlife corridor best practice guide. We looked at, mule deer habitats, coyote, mountain lion, where they're most prevalent, gray fox, tortoise, and a number of different species, badger, kit fox, diamondback rattlesnakes, and some of those different environments that you'll find them, as well as some of our riparian areas. You don't have a lot of riparian areas in our arid environment, but we do in the Gila River. So we were very sensitive to that as well. We also, one of the big items that the development community has asked for, and I know other cities, when I worked in Surprise, we were exploring wildlife corridors, and a lot of the landowners in the area, were asking about incentives and tools, open space credits, density transfers. And those are a lot of the items that our council, when we adopted this plan, was very supportive of working through to find incentives for developers to spend a little extra or give a little extra that'll have some financial opportunity for them moving forward. And so that was something we explored, looked at many other cities and projects throughout the United States. And we would be happy to share this document. We can send an email out for everyone to take a look at as well. Wildlife corridors, there's so many different types. Yeah, go ahead. I think I heard somebody. Wildlife corridors that we looked at, you could have up to a mile to half mile wide. But as you get some of the development communities moving forward, you might have to work with corridors in the range of 100 to 200 to 300 feet. And we now have certain best practices in mind that if I win the lottery or the staff wins the lottery and you have a whole new staff coming on board, we have a foundation and we have something we can speak to, bring to meetings to try to get the most out of these corridors as possible. That's really our goal. This is just another exhibit of how a corridor can be successful through a community. These are some of the things that we're going to share when we're at the table with some of the new developments coming in. Roadway crossings are critical. You guys saw the transportation plan with some of these major arterials and freeways. There's a lot of partnerships and funding and a number of different items that we'll have to look at as these corridors cross some of these major infrastructures that we also identified in our guide. Also at the neighborhood scale, we need to be good stewards in our neighborhood with lighting, trail buffers, and a number of different items that are sensitive to wildlife that we also took a look at. Just wanted to run through that and let you know that we're very serious about it. Our council is very supportive of it. We're going to continue to do the best we can as we work with some of these developers moving forward. And we appreciate the partnerships with the White Tank Mountain Conservancy, the story map. I think the more partnerships, the better. And I appreciate again the opportunity to speak today. That's all I have. Boring any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. So I think what you've been hearing from the speakers so far is, myself included, is really growth. I think that seems to be the really strong theme that you're hearing. And so the importance of the Conservancy is to make sure that the growth is also responsible. And with Surprise being another fast-growing city, when I started working for the city of Surprise with Adam years ago, or his dad, back in 1999, the population was 30,800. What is it, over 100 or about 140,000 today, council member?
Yeah, census was 143,000. That was about a year ago, and it's gone up since then.
Yeah, so that's just in a 22-year period. So our next speaker is Councilmember Chris Judd with the City of Surprise, who will share what Surprise is doing in their efforts to preserve the wildlife corridors. Councilmember Judd has been an elected official with the city since 2018. He is a native Arizonan and a graduate of ASU. And what I'd like to kind of wrap up with his bio is that he really, truly is a strong community leader. And he's very involved with several groups in his community, not only serving the residents of the city, but also on the board of directors for the Surprise Rotary and very involved with the Surprise Chamber. So Councilmember Judd, the floor is yours.
Okay, let's try to figure out how to share my screen again. Let's see. Okay, and did it work?
Yep, we can see you.
All right. Well, thank you, Centra. I want to start off by giving a big thank you to CASGA and to the White Tank Mountain Conservancy for hosting this event, and to Jamie Gonzalez for all of her work organizing this. Hi, my name's Chris Judd. I'm here to talk about our snow-capped white tanks. I'm a councilman in Surprise, and I serve on the executive board for the White Tanks Conservancy. I have a quick 5-minute presentation about the growth of Surprise and what we are doing to support connectivity in our city and to the White Tank Mountains. And then if anyone has any questions, I can take questions after that. Our city council is very interested in keeping the White Tank Mountains wild. However, we have some challenges ahead of us, and we can start off by looking at our projected population growth, which was touched on well by both Sintra and Dana. So we'll be quick on that. I mean, we've got nearly 150,000 now, and by 2050, we'll have almost 400,000 just in Surprise. And so how do the White Tank Mountains fit into our plans? The City of Surprise participated in the 2021 National Community Survey, and residents had the opportunity to rank their priorities. 82% of our residents stated that protecting the White Tank Mountains was a priority, making this the second top priority on the list. 78% of our residents ranked preserving our open space and growth areas as a priority, making this the fourth priority on the list. So through surveys like this, residents have made it very clear that they expect us to find ways to protect the White Tank Mountains as we grow. One of our council priorities is to provide a connected park experience through the development of an overall park system. Now, parks and wildlife corridors don't necessarily replace each other, but they go well together. So if you can use parks as a buffer for wildlife corridors, but you can't really use a park as a corridor. However, we plan on pursuing opportunities to create new parks and open spaces while protecting our natural environment. So as the city grows, we're going to be set in the desert plain between the White Tank Mountains to the south and the Bradshaw Mountains to the north. This natural setting of mountains connected by washes provides us with an opportunity to utilize the existing wash systems to create a natural framework for corridors and parks. This means we can use areas like the Tribbley Wash, the 2 West Wash, Picacho Wash, also McMicken Dam and the CAP Canal to provide a framework to help us create a network of connected parks and walkways through the city. So between the washes and the features, this provides great opportunities for large open space corridors, conservation areas, and specifically wildlife corridors. So the City of Surprise has been working with the Game and Fish Department for a while to develop wildlife linkages as we grow outward. Our general plan contains some biological resource goals. These goals include protect and enhance wash corridors and environments, discourage mass grading of large parcels to prevent environmental damage, and preserve wildlife ecosystems and sensitive habitat areas. We also have a directive in there in our quality of life section that states work with the town of Buckeye, Maricopa County, Arizona Game and Fish to identify and implement wildlife open space corridors between the White Tank Mountains, the Hassayampa River, the Awafree River, and the McMicken Dam. And finally, this map from our general plan shows the areas identified as critical wildlife linkages. Our general plan calls for these areas to have wildlife-friendly regulations. This is what Surprise is doing to help support the White Tank Mountains and the wildlife that moves in and out of the park. Thank you very much for listening and for taking an interest in keeping the White Tanks wild. And any questions?
I've been monitoring the chat and I think we're good for now.
Okay.
Actually, there's been a question about dark skies. And I think maybe we leave that for the end because I'm sure that everyone in their own jurisdiction is working on.
So there's a question there about wildlife friendly regulations. It's just like it sounds. So we haven't defined it very much, but the corridors, which you can't see my screen anymore, but the corridors that we've identified coming off the north of the mountains, they're an area that we know are critical to mule deer, mountain lions, and things like that. And we know this because the Game and Fish Department did some studies out there. So as those areas develop and turn into whatever they're going to turn into, we want to have regulations in place to preserve those corridors. So we want to make corridors as big as we can. And the next question, has Surprise mandated any corridors in recently approved plans? We have not mandated any corridors. We can't really mandate any corridors. We've got some small corridors as washes go through in some of those north areas there. We're also getting ready to go into our general plan season where we're going to approve our general plan again, and we'll have more tools available to. We can't really mandate with the general plan, but if something that's in the general plan doesn't mean it's definitely going to happen. But if it's not in the general plan, it's probably not going to happen. So these are the things that we need in our general plan, because we can use this as tools to developers, and when people want to annex into the city, they know what their expectations are.
Great, thank you so much. You know, one of my favorite things. Oh, did someone have something else? No? Okay. So as was mentioned a couple of times, I'm an avid hiker. And when I first joined the Conservancy several years ago, Les would talk about the mule deer and the animals all the time. And I thought, well, I just like to hike, you know, he's so concerned about these animals. But, you know, I'm looking at the people that are out there and the people with the pups like me. And then one day I was hiking and this incredible noise happened and everything just kind of stopped, and it was several mule deer running across the mountain. And so until you experience that, it's just, you really, I think, can't really take it in. And so we are very fortunate that we have this in our backyard. And it's great to see that Surprise and Buckeye and other communities are working towards making sure that these animals continue to have a place to be in and connect throughout the mountains. So I am going to introduce our next speaker, Bob Weisner, and Bob is also with the city of Buckeye. He is the conservation project manager for the city, and he's been with the city for the past 8 years. He oversees the planning and development of parks and recreation amenities for the city, and was instrumental in implementing my favorite park, Skyline Park Regional Park, which is 8,700 acre, which is an 8,700 acre mountain preserve with 22 miles of trails. He has a master's in urban planning from the state of University of New York at Buffalo. From SUNY, my goodness.
Yes.
Buffalo upstate. So take it away, Bob.
Sure. Well, thank you, Les, and to everyone with the White Tank Mountain Conservancy. I really appreciate the opportunity to share with you some of Buckeye's open space plans. And it's great to see so many familiar faces on this Zoom call. So again, thank you all for joining us. So I think you've all heard that, again, that resounding message of growth in the West Valley. But this was a slide that we included in our Parks and Recreation Master Plan. And this is looking at growth in Buckeye. So in 1900, Buckeye had a population of 200 people. That's it, just 200. But in the most recent census in 2020, we had a population of just over 91,000 people, which based on the number of housing permits that have been issued since the time that those census counts were taken, we now estimate our population to be over 104,000 people. And like Adam had mentioned, we are looking at 1 million population at build out. But back in 2002, when Buckeye had the small population of over 6,500, city leaders had the foresight to look at how we could conserve open space in the city. And so at that point, the city leaders submitted an application to the Bureau of Land Management that would allow us to develop Skyline Regional Park. So that occurred in 2002, and we weren't able to open the park until 2016. So it was a great milestone for us to go from that initial planning all the way back in 2002 to being able to open that park. And since we've opened it, it's been amazing to see the growth in visitation. So back in 2016, we had about 188,000 people that came into the park. We have a vehicle counter that's at the entrance, and that's how we collect that data. But over the few years since it opened, we've seen that growth in visitation. So between that 4-year period, we've seen 125% growth in visitation to Skyline Regional Park. The other thing to note is once COVID hit, we saw, just like a lot of other agencies, and I'm sure RJ can attest to this too at White Tank Mountain Regional Park, we saw a big increase in the number of visitors who were getting outside to enjoy the White Tank Mountains. So this blue lines that you can see in this chart are from 2020. So March and April of that year, we saw a 95% increase in visitation over the previous months in 2019. So it's a huge growth. What you can also see in this graph is all these numbers by month are trending up. So again, it just goes to show that the visitation has been greatly increasing, and the demand for open space is more than ever before. So in order to keep up with that growth, the city has looked at how we can expand the parking at Skyline Regional Park and how we can future amenitize that area while respecting the resources that are there within the property. Right now, we only have 65 parking spaces. So that's not a lot, especially when, looking at those vehicle counts. And some of those hours, on a Saturday morning between 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock, you're seeing over 100 cars enter into that park, yet we only have 65 parking spaces. And we know people are staying in that park longer than just 1 hour. So we worked with Kimley Horn on a feasibility study that would look at how we could expand to provide the resources that are needed for that increased visitation. And so this is just the concept plan from that feasibility study that you see on your screen. And this will be developed over several years. So this will be a phased plan. And so what we're looking at right now in the immediate future is adding an additional 79 parking spaces, which are shown in this pinkish color, both on the north end of the Watson Trailhead, but also on the south. But in the future, we have plans to expand west on Arizona State Trust land and looking at purchasing some Arizona State Trust land so that we're able to grow our 65 parking spaces out to 672 parking spaces, and also switching where our current equestrian parking is over to the west. We're also looking at, into the future, looking at an interpretive center, also looking at like an amphitheater where we can conduct our environmental education programs. Right now, we don't have a suitable space, so this would allow us to in the future have that space. So if any of you have taken any of our classes at Skyline Regional Park, Adam, when we have our stargazing programs, we really don't have the space to accommodate that. We're using the equestrian lot. So by increasing this, it will give us that opportunity to accommodate the growth. But the city of Buckeye is also looking at other ways that we can expand open space opportunities. So last year, City Council approved submitting a lease application to the Bureau of Land Management for 2 parcels that are on the southwest side of the mountain range. These 2 parcels are pretty much in the foothills of the White Tank Mountains. So as you can see, Skyline Regional Park, the southern portion of the park is shown here in green. And then Miller Road is just to the east of these parcels where the Army National Guard facility is. So we've submitted that lease application to BLM for a 320-acre parcel that's sandwiched in between future growth of the Tartesso Master Plan community, and then a 1,030-acre parcel that's pretty much dead north of the I-10 and State Route 85 interchange. So we've been calling these our central parks, and we've been working with our consultant to look at the different uses that could occur on these parcels in future plans. But again, this is another one of those long-term, long-phase projects. So you're not going to see any action happen overnight. This is something that the city leaders, just like they did in 2002 when they submitted that lease application for Skyline Regional Park, and almost 15 years later, it came to fruition. This is another one of those things, where those plans are in place. City leaders have the foresight to know that we need to conserve those open spaces, and we'll be working towards that with the Bureau of Land Management. Another thing that we're also looking at to expand those open space opportunities is on the east side of Skyline Regional Park with the border with Verrado. So there's 2 BLM parcels, again, that are on that east side, and those total between the 2 parcels 640 acres. So that would bring the total acreage in Skyline Regional Park up to 9,300 acres. So again, back in 2016, the city leaders had the foresight to get to submit those lease applications to the Bureau of Land Management. And so that's something that we're going to continue to coordinate with them to have that come to fruition and look at how we can have that connectivity between the trails in Skyline Regional Park, or 22 miles of trails in Skyline Regional Park, and how that can connect over to the Verrado community. We also completed a Skyline Regional Park Trails Master Plan. So as Cintra mentioned, we do have the 22 miles of trails. All of those trails are located in the southern half of the park, pretty much located south of the Indian School road alignment. So all these trails have been constructed with the exception of one loop that we have on our southern end of the park that we're looking at in the next few years, getting that constructed. But in total, we have plans to build 55 miles of trails in the park. And you can see on these blue lines where they're located. So we want to make sure that we, again, have those that connectivity over with Verrado. We also have a connection over to the Sienna Hills Master Plan community that's located to the southwest. We also have future connections to the Tartesso Master Plan community on the western side of the park. But we've also looking at how we can in the future have connectivity with the trails in White Tank Mountain Regional Park. And eventually connecting into perhaps the Goat Camp Trail. We're also looking at how we can enhance resources for the wildlife within Skyline Regional Park, and how can we get the public to better understand and appreciate and respect those resources. And so one thing that we are looking at is the installation of wildlife cameras and being able to have that information shared via our social media channels so that the public has a better understanding of what's out there. Like Cintra mentioned, I've been out there hiking in Skyline Regional Park, and the one time I was out there, I just heard something snorting. And I'm like, where is that sound coming from? I was like, and it was mule deer. I've also seen some javelina in Skyline Regional Park, Gila monster. And it's always great whenever you get the calls from the public who call you up and ask about mountain lions, where they say, hey, I was out at Skyline, was on this trail, we saw a mountain lion. It's like, oh, wow, it's great to hear. So we'd like to let the public know that there is wildlife out there, allow them to better appreciate and understand that they do exist in the mountain. And one thing that we're also looking at is the partnership with Arizona Game and Fish Department and adding water catchment facilities in Skyline Regional Park. So we've been speaking with them about that opportunity too. Adam had talked a little bit about our rivers to ridges that's in our Parks and Recreation Master Plan that was adopted by Buckeye City Council in 2016. And this is really taking a holistic view of how we can connect our open spaces in Buckeye. So Buckeye is very fortunate within its 640 square mile planning area to have the White Tank Mountain Range, but we also have Buckeye Hills. We also have the Sonoran Desert National Monument in our southern municipal planning area. But we also have the Hassayampa River on our western end of our planning area, and the Gila River that traverses the city from east to west. So how do we connect those open space resources to be able to have someone go from Skyline Regional Park and hike down to the Gila River? How can we have those trail connectivity from Skyline Regional Park west over to the White Tank Mountains? And towards that end, we've been working with the Flood Control District of Maricopa County. So right now they are working on the Sun Valley Area Drainage Master Plan. And that drainage master plan looks at how those storm flows coming off the White Tank Mountains and how that can be conveyed west to the Hassayampa River. And that really presents an interesting and unique opportunity to have a multi-use benefit with those flood control channels, to have trails located adjacent to them to be able to provide that connectivity. And these rivers to ridges trails will be the more significant trails in the city's planning area. And so, through our planning efforts and through public meetings that we've had, we are looking at those trails being a 12-foot wide concrete path with a 4-foot soft shoulder. That way we're able to accommodate multi-uses, whether that's equestrian use, whether it's people on their bicycles or pedestrian type of activities. So this is really looking at how those open space tracks can be connected in Buckeye's vast planning area. Another thing that we look at, so Adam and myself, we get to review all the development applications that come into the city, and we have pre-application conferences for each of the developers who are interested in coming into the city of Buckeye. And during those first initial meetings with them, we talk about the city's requirements, that we talk about our guidelines, and some of the things that both Adam and I are looking for when those developments come in, at the beginning stage of that pre-application conference, all the way through them receiving their permits, as they're going through their pre-platting and looking at their lotting for their units to their final plat, but then also looking at their landscape plans. Is looking to making sure that those open spaces have that permeability between them. So we're looking at those open edge treatments. And as you can see on the screen, this is just an example of one such thing that would provide that open edge along the open space track. So, having a public park adjacent to that, where you have a little bit of a buffer, having paseos or trails that would connect onto it, having retention basins located adjacent to it, single loaded streets or T intersections. So there's a lot of ways that you can try to have that resource as more of an amenity, instead of having rear lots all back onto that and shutting that off from the public and having access onto that. We also are looking at, through the Wildlife Corridors Best Management Practices Guide, like Adam had talked about before, making sure that those developments as they're coming in and encouraging low lighting, making sure that development is using native vegetation adjacent to those open space tracks, looking at those lower density type of development adjacent to it, the permeability with the open edge treatment, and looking at the restriction to walls to have that permeability, and looking at also how we can align our transportation corridors to run parallel to instead of perpendicular and bisecting those wildlife corridors. So I'm going to give John Sefton a shout out. I see he's on here too. So and I'm pretty jealous of what the city of Peoria did. So the city of Peoria had prepared a plan for their Sonoran preservation program. And I think this is definitely an opportunity for the city of Buckeye, working in tandem and in partnership with the White Tank Mountains Conservancy, to also look at developing. And within that Sonoran preservation program, that plan, through an intensive and rigorous data process, looked at what those priority lands would be for preservation because of their high open space values. And so I really think that presents a great opportunity for the city, working with the Conservancy to develop a similar plan for the city of Buckeye, and then working in partnership with them, look at how we can possibly acquire those lands that have been identified as high priority lands that are near and adjacent to the mountains, or perhaps are within a wildlife corridor. So just like I had mentioned before, the city leaders had the foresight to look at conserving open space. And I think all of us here, are strong advocates for open space and can all work together so that the future planning for Buckeye is bright, and that we make sure that these open spaces stay wild. So I want to thank you all for having me, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thanks, Bob. So we have several questions actually in the chat box, and I'm going to pull some of them up. And I think they might be for a variety of the speakers that we've had so far. So before we go on to RJ, I want to make sure that we get some of these questions answered. So specifically, and Bob, maybe this is a question for either you or Adam, but what are some of the current proposed incentives that we have to implement for developers to implement wildlife corridors? We've heard several times that they prefer to build a trail to one of these parks as opposed to a golf course, but maybe you can elaborate a little bit on that type of incentive and others.
Yeah, no, it's an excellent question. We actually have quite a few tools that are opportunities through our development agreement process. Through various development agreements, there's possibilities of creating various improvement districts that might allow some of these open spaces to be funded through sales tax collection, and we're exploring those opportunities. Others include density transfers. So as an example, if a project comes in and they have multifamily, low density residential, medium density, there might be some opportunity where they can transfer densities throughout the project, or possibly get more density in areas that are further away from a corridor, near a commercial area, or near a major corridor that gives them some density bonuses. Other incentives include we're exploring possible fee incentives, where some of the development fees could be reduced if there's possibility of working with the city on different open space opportunities. And so there's a number of items that we're exploring, but at the end of the day, they all have to pass what we call the smell test. They have to pass the legal scrutiny. But I think more importantly, being able to work with a developer who's passionate and where we could tell the story of why this is important. A lot of those, just the partnership alone goes a long way with some of these projects. Some of these owners that are out there, you're dealing with one or two people over a 60,000 acre area. And so that's, now's the time to really, talk to the folks and get some buy-in, early on. And it's just the art of negotiation. Most of the success we've had in the projects that I've had, it's the art of negotiation and asking for some of these opportunities that are important to the city. But again, we are exploring other incentives. We've just set the foundation of that topic for discussion. So if any on this call has any incentives that they work with in their communities, feel free to send them our way.
Thanks, Adam. And while you're on, I'm going to ask another question. You mentioned during your presentation that there's some studies and analysis showing the economic benefits of open space. Is there a place that we can find this? Is it on the website, or is it something that you can either drop in the chat or send to the Conservancy and we can share it with the attendees?
Yeah, sure. I think there's a couple areas. The consultants we were working with, we did a number of case studies throughout the United States. And there was quite a bit of information that they found. We also had some economic review of some of these corridors that we can see if we can pull. And then also the area drainage master plan that the Flood Control District of Maricopa County is working on. We're looking at kind of a sliding scale of, man-made versus naturalized washes on possible cost savings. So I don't have it readily available, but it's something that I could take a look at and see if I could send your way when I track some of that information down. I'd be happy to look at that.
Great, thank you. I probably have one more, but I'm gonna hit this one first. And again, this is probably one that you've heard from a planning perspective for a number of years, but anyone else is certainly welcome to chime in on this one. So water, right? That is a huge issue. We live in the desert. There's a lot in the news right now about the Colorado River being at record lows. So with all this growth that several of us shared with the group this evening, what are we doing as leaders to help with that and to manage our growth in the future? There's a lot of residential growth coming. There's a lot of commercial growth. How are we going to manage the water supply to make sure that we're sustainable? And if you can address that from the Buckeye perspective and possibly Councilmember Judd from the Surprise perspective, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could start with the Buckeye perspective. We actually just adopted a water conservation ordinance in Buckeye that gives certain incentives for even homeowners that could get reduction on bills that have no grass or less irrigation. We're also looking at native vegetation and working with different HOAs to work better and work smarter on how they irrigate most of their vegetation. The city is also looking at other ways and resources to find water, with different state agencies. But I've also heard of the term, and I'm not an expert, water storage is also something, as some of these areas flood, and if they're not retained on site, or they depending on where the water goes, if it's an engineered corridor, they're looking at water storage opportunities as well that will allow some groundwater replenishment in areas that are critical. But that's just kind of a snapshot. Buckeye is serious about it, and we're heavily involved at trying to find other ways to conserve water as we move forward.
Yeah, and Surprise, we're in a good spot water-wise. I think someone had asked a question earlier asking, mentioned water levels going down. I don't know what it's like elsewhere, but I know in Surprise our water table is continuing to go up. I heard a stat here recently that the Phoenix metro area in general is using about the same amount of water now as we used in 1956. And that's mostly because irrigation uses a lot of water, and a lot of irrigation has been displaced. Now, water shortages would definitely put the brakes on growth, and that's about the only thing that can put the brakes on growth. We've got people moving here, people wanting to move here, and it's all private property. So if somebody owns some land and want to build a bunch of houses, there's nothing stopping them from doing that. Whether or not they annex into Surprise, Buckeye, Peoria, any of those places, the people are coming, the growth is coming. So we've got a handful of water policies in place. We regularly recharge, and we're using less than half of what our allocated water is in Surprise, that is. And we're in the process of acquiring another water company to give us even more capacity. So we've got very good long-term water solutions. But again, if we at some point we don't expect to ever run out of water, the question really is, at what point does water become too expensive to purchase? Because if you look at the CAP is basically a pipeline piping water into the valley. There's nothing to stop water being piped in from other places like the ocean and then being desalinated, which would be excruciatingly expensive. So it becomes more of an engineering problem, and who the heck can afford something like that problem?
Thank you both. Yeah, those are excellent responses. It's definitely something that I think when people look around, your average resident looks around, they think, my goodness, there's a lot of growth happening, and is there any planning towards water? And you mentioned a couple of the organizations. CAP is certainly one of them. SRP is another. AMWAR, the cities all participate in coming together and working with together to manage the water supply. Everyone is definitely concerned about the water situation and monitoring all of that. The drought contingency plan was created and passed a couple of years ago, I think, and so there's kind of a lot happening in that area. But you know, to your point, the people are coming, and we are certainly managing all of that as best as possible. So thank you. Let's see. I'm gonna go to our last speaker. There's a couple more questions afterwards, but I'm gonna go to our last speaker, RJ Cardin, who is the director for Maricopa County Parks and Recreation Department, which is one of the largest regional park system in the United States. He has more than 30 years of diverse parks experience and parks and recreation experience, including local, county, state government, commercial recreation, and also in the nonprofit sector. He holds a master's from ASU, focusing on outdoor recreation and tourism. But before I turn it over to RJ, I have to tell a little story about the very first time I met RJ. I was working for the city of Surprise, and the manager at the time really wanted to run a tram up to the top of the White Tank Mountains. And somehow that became my project. So I got to go meet with RJ and talk about the feasibility of this. And he looked at me like I had 20 heads. So I'm sure he felt sorry for me, which is why we still have a great relationship today. And needless to say, there is not a tram going to the top of the mountain, the top of the White Tanks. So RJ, if you would. I think you're still muted, RJ. Yes, you're still muted.
Okay, can you see my
Here we
screen?
go, yes.
All right, thank you. And Sintra, I remember that. Actually, I was thinking about that story, and I thought maybe I shouldn't tell that. Yes, I remember meeting with you, and I remember some terse words with the city manager of Surprise at that time. And thankfully, the Arizona Republic actually put up a poll, I believe, that said 78% of the people were against putting a tram to the top with a restaurant at the top of the White Tank Mountains. And so
That's right, the restaurant.
that ended that statement. So anyway, thank you, Sintra. I'm honored to be here with such a distinguished panel of guests. And I just want to talk to you a little bit about the Maricopa County Regional Park System, and then also share a little bit about the White Tank Mountain Regional Park as well. One of the things that I always like to do with people, because even though many of us have lived here for many years, just understanding the magnitude of this county, I know several speakers have talked about the magnitude just of the West Valley alone. But in terms of population, Maricopa County is the 4th largest county in the United States. The 2020 population was 4.6 million, according to the census. And the county makes up more than half of Arizona's entire population. Also, in the last 3 years, Maricopa County has been the fastest growing county in the United States. I think I heard a stat just the other day that 12% of the entire population that is moving around the United States, 12% is actually moving to Arizona. So fast growing area. Maricopa County is also 9,225 square miles, which also makes us the 14th largest county in land mass in the United States. And we're actually larger than several states in the country. Just to talk a little bit about our Maricopa County Regional Park System, we have 12 regional parks in Maricopa County. We actually have 2 new parks, the Hassayampa River Preserve, that was donated to us by the Nature Conservancy, and we will break ground on the 70,000 acre Vulture Mountain Regional Park just outside of Wickenburg this spring. Our park system is also 181,000 acres, and we are actually in 3 counties. Although we're called Maricopa County Parks, we are actually in Yavapai County and Pinal County as well. For our entire system, we have 284 miles of trails within our parks. And then we have the Maricopa Trail, which is 361 miles. So we have a total of 645 total trail miles within the county regional system. Last year, we had about 1.9, almost 2 million park visitors. That was a 9.2% increase over the previous year. And the previous year was about a 25% increase over the year before that. So definitely, as Bob Weisner mentioned, during COVID, we saw a huge increase in visitation. It has since plateaued, but plateaued at a much higher level. We do a lot of the work in our park system with volunteers. We had 95,000 volunteer hours last year. We have some wonderful interpretive programs through our interpretive rangers that are in each of the parks. We host numerous special events through special use permits, mountain bike races, running races, equestrian events, a whole host of different events are in our parks every year. We have 58 different concessionaires, private sector concessionaires that operate within our park system. And then lots and lots of partners. Just like many of the speakers have talked about here today, we partner with all of the cities in Maricopa County, along with a diverse group of nonprofit organizations like COSGA and the White Tank Mountains Conservancy. One of the things that I'm actually most proud of that we've started within the last 4 years of the department is our own natural resources division within Maricopa County Parks and Recreation Department. We have developed natural resource planning. We're planning for each one of our county regional parks. And we've also developed a Desert Defenders program to help with fire mitigation as well as invasive species mitigation. And just some of the things that we generally have within our parks, trails is a huge draw for us, as well as our many campgrounds that we have within the park system. But we also have lots of day use activities, from archaeology programs, archery. Lake Pleasant is a huge draw for us. We have wonderful nature playgrounds within our parks, lots of picnicking opportunities, wildlife viewing, etc. And then we're also very proud about the 26,000 square foot desert outdoor center at Lake Pleasant that provides educational opportunities for about 10,000 school kids every year. And then I mentioned we have a large number of concessionaires that operate within our parks, from 4 golf courses to horseback riding operations, a marina at Lake Pleasant, and you can see the rest of the list, a water park, Six Flags Water Park at Adobe Dam Regional Park as well. And just to talk a little bit about White Tank Mountain Regional Park. White Tank Mountain Regional Park is 30,000 acres. It's the largest regional park in the county park system and one of the largest regional parks in the entire United States. Most of the park is made up of rugged, beautiful mountains. And as the rains happen in those mountains and scour out some of the chutes that come off of there and scour out depressions, that white granite rock is what really is the namesake of the mountains, the White Tank Mountains. And those actually hold water many times throughout the year for wildlife. White Tank Mountain Regional Park became a park in 1961. Just an interesting little aside, when I was doing some research here recently, I was looking at some op-eds from the early 1960s, and there was an op-ed in the Arizona Republic, and someone mentioned, why the heck would anybody ever build a park out in the White Tank Mountains? There will never be anyone that will live that far west in Maricopa County. And now we know that park eventually could be completely surrounded by development. And actually, when I started with the county park system 15 years ago, that was one of my challenges. Was in 2006, development was really going gangbusters, and I looked at White Tank Mountain Regional Park, and I thought, how can we preserve this as really an urban wilderness with development all the way around it? So I am truly thankful that the White Tank Mountains Conservancy has come along and made it a priority to try and preserve wildlife corridors into this park. The highest elevation in the park is 4,000 feet. Again, we acquired this property from the Bureau of Land Management. Much of the property in the Maricopa County Park System has been acquired from the Bureau of Land Management, either through leases or acquisitions at a huge sum of $2.50 an acre. The last master plan for the park was done in 2014. We have 42 miles of trails. We have 2 campgrounds. And then the busiest trail actually in the entire Maricopa County Park System is the Waterfall Trail within White Tank Mountain Regional Park. One of the things that I was asked to talk a little bit about was some of the research that we collect on visitors to not only the White Tank Mountain Regional Park, but the county park system as a whole. And so here you can see we do a survey generally every 5 to 6 years with Arizona State University. You can see level of satisfaction with our county parks continues to go up, and the perceived quality continues to go up. And at the bottom, you can see White Tank out of a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being extremely satisfied. White Tank is at a 4.8. So it's near the top of satisfaction levels. Also, we look at what activities people participate in, and this is for the entire system, but it mirrors that of White Tank Mountain Regional Park. The most popular activity is trail hiking, followed by walking for pleasure, photography, and then watching wildlife and bird watching are round out the top 5, along with nature experience being number 6. The other thing we always ask people is not just what activity did you participate in, but why did you come to the park? What motivated you to come to an open space regional park? If walking for pleasure, if that's something that you want to do, you can do that within your neighborhood. So why are you coming to the White Tank Mountains to do that? The top 5 reasons were observing the scenic beauty, enjoying the sounds and smells of nature, enjoying physical exercise, to experience the open space, and then to improve my physical health. The other thing we ask people when they fill out that survey is a little bit about their spending behaviors, because we want to know that not only are these parks important from a wildlife standpoint, from a quality of life standpoint, but also there are economic values to this. And we know that our parks get about 30% of the visitation from out of state, or at least out of the region. And we know that our county parks generate $93.3 million in direct spending in 2019, $82.74 million in visitor expenditures, $10 million in overall operating expenses, and then $117 million in output, $69 million in gross revenue, and $45 million in labor income. The other stat that is not on here is we also, through a calculation, figured out that for every dollar that is invested in at least a Maricopa County Regional Park, there are $4.85 of economic impact returned to the region. And I mentioned the park master plan was completed in 2014, and we do a master plan for every park in our system that guides how we will, 1, protect that park, and then also develop that park. And with the White Tank Mountain Regional Park master plan in 2014, there were recommendations for developing new facilities, maintaining and rehabbing existing facilities, expanding education and interpretive opportunities, continue to improve administratively, but also continue to improve partnerships. And then number 5 is resource protection. And I want to talk just about developing new facilities and resource protection, because that's really the balance that we try and deal with the Maricopa County Parks. Is the resources are the goose that lays the golden egg. Without them, we have nothing. So we need to certainly protect that. this photo on this slide is something that I'm just amazed at. This is just from this month, 2021, and that's a bighorn sheep that was captured on a wildlife camera in the White Tank Mountains. We have not, and we first saw those a year ago. The bighorn sheep had not been seen in the White Tank Mountains for over 30 years. And now we're starting to see those again. And I'm very concerned if we don't maintain these wildlife corridors, these guys are not going to be there. But in terms of new facilities for the park, we're looking at a north entrance, approximately 243rd Avenue, new and upgraded campgrounds, which we've already done within the park, cabins, new trailheads and trail connections, and then additional parking. And then with resources, we want to continue to monitor species within the park, protect wildlife corridors, buffer the park from encroachment, protect visual resources, plan better for water. And one of the comments or the questions was wildlife water. And we're working with Game and Fish to rehab 10 different wildlife water spots within the 30,000 acre White Tank Mountain Regional Park. And then we've also implemented a dark skies program for White Tank Mountain Regional Park. And then finally, I just wanted to mention quickly, we're in the process now of updating our park system master plan that really looks out into the future, and that's called Park Vision 2030. And that will look to how do we develop and preserve parks even further west in Maricopa County, so there can be an op-ed in the paper maybe next week saying, why in the heck would anybody want to preserve Hummingbird Springs? Nobody will ever live out there. With that, I'll turn it back to you, Sintra.
Thanks, RJ. I think you hit some of the questions that we had earlier in the chat box. I think what you all heard this evening, and I'll get to some of the questions that are in the box. I know we're really pushing the time limit, but they are important, so I'd like to get to them. But I think one of the things clearly that you heard from all of the speakers tonight is not only are we growing, but we're focused on making this the best environment for economic development opportunities. It's all tied together because with residents comes the need for jobs and services and so on, but then also extremely important is the preservation of outdoor space and our natural resources. So I'm going to get to a couple of the questions here. This is maybe is for Adam. What is population density today and what is it projected? Do we know that, or is that something that we would have to provide information at a later date?
Yeah, so density by human density, not okay. Yeah, so we're estimating just average in Buckeye is going to be around 3 to 5 dwelling units an acre, and that's overall. But generally, you see generally master plan communities have that 3 to 5 dwelling unit an acre range. But you will have clusters of areas where you'll have high density, lower density, medium, and then quite a bit of open space, especially as you get north of I-10. There's a lot of alluvial fans and washes where some of those densities are concentrated to get that overall 5 dwelling unit an acre. So it's really all over the board, but overall we usually see around the 3 to 5 an acre average.
Thank you. Here's another question. So all of the plans that were discussed regarding water is really for people, but what about the wildlife out there? Natural waters, not just artificial catchments.
Yeah, so that came up. Some of our stakeholders brought that up through the public participation process as part of our wildlife corridor best practices guide. We don't have anything currently in our standards that specifically target water availability for wildlife, but what we do have is our engineering development standards currently regulate retention on site, where you have to retain a 100-year storm event. But what we are looking at is ways to be able to possibly look at storm drainage where the water can get back to the rivers, the water can get back to the washes. That will help reduce some of the retention requirements. If the water goes in the areas that are most natural, we think that will really thrive both with the landscaping. It won't dry up the natural vegetation if the water can make it back to the washes. And it also provide water and ponding for different species. The third thing that we're looking at is even incentivizing as open space is I can't remember the term, but they're green infrastructures. I believe that's what it is, green infrastructures that will allow possible residential areas to have open areas and green infrastructures that could have possibly some areas that where wildlife can come and get water in some, smaller ponds and things of that nature that are all part of a possible reclaim system. We are just scratching the surface, but it's something that is on our radar and that we're working through with our engineering department to see how we can evolve and be able to ensure that a lot of these washes don't dry out. That's really one of the key perspectives in the next 3 to 5 years in our strategic plan.
Adam, can you talk a little bit about water conservation and maybe some of the programs that the cities have today? And how is that information getting out to residents?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. We mentioned that we have a water conservation ordinance that we just passed. That was we worked with a lot of our major landowners in the Home Builders Association, which is huge. Our Home Builders Association actually accepted, supported where we're going. They said as long as we require conservation in every project and not just one or two, they're supportive. So it doesn't create a competitive disadvantage for one community with a lot of grass versus one community with a lot of desert landscape. So we committed to ensure that we'll be consistent with all communities to have very limited areas that have grass and high water use and try to focus more on the Sonoran Desert landscape, that we're going to see probably more of a significant decrease in water with just that simple water conservation ordinance. Other items that we're looking at is, I know Dana is familiar and some others on the phone, but we have a massive waterlogged area. It's kind of funny you hear that in an arid environment. We have a waterlogged area that is that hugs and is adjacent to our Gila River, and it goes from Gila River basically to I-10. The groundwater is sometimes 20 feet deep. It could be 10 feet, 30 feet, 40 feet in certain areas. We are exploring similar items that Councilmember Judd mentioned. The water quality is just not that great. So we are exploring, possible desalination opportunities. The more communities do that, the more California does it, the cost will start going down. But again, it's just scratching the surface because we're starting to drill more wells as the development increases and we're finding the different qualities of water. There's a lot of water there. It's just the quality that we're dealing with that we're having some concerns, but also opportunities to find ways to look at those. But that's kind of my 30,000 foot view answer. And but be happy to share more information from our Water Resources Department. If anybody wants to shoot me an email, there's a lot more information behind that.
Or they can check the website too. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We've got one last question about climate change. I know I can tell you that I recently attended an event that the city of Phoenix mayor spoke about, and that's definitely something that's hot on the radar for not only the city of Phoenix, but the whole metro region and the state. So anything else from any of the speakers to add to that? Okay, great. So I have to say, I am extremely impressed with this audience. It is 8:06 and we still have the vast majority. I think we've only lost 3 people this evening. So that shows that your interest in this work is really high, and not only your attendance tonight, but your active participation with some of these extremely thoughtful questions. So before I close, I know we're a little bit over. I'd like to thank Casca, the White Tanks Conservancy, the Nina Mason Pulliam Charitable Trust for their support of the Connectivity Initiative, the Story Map, and everyone that's been a contributor in this effort. And I will say that speaking of contributors, a huge and special thank you goes out to Jamie Gonzalez, who not only kept the Conservancy's work on track, but really herded cats to get all of this done and put the series together. So thank you so much, Jamie. To our speakers, for your time this evening, you shared so much great information going on in your communities, and really helped educate our residents and our attendees. And then, of course, to the attendees, again, thank you so much for sticking with us tonight and learning all of this and being so actively involved. With that, I will turn it over to Anita.
All right, thank you so much, Cintra. Thank you everybody so much for joining us. Again, this part 2 of this 3-part series is to highlight the White Tank Mountains Connectivity Initiative and the story map, which you previewed today with Dana Warnicki. And so the links have been dropped into the chat if you want to learn more about the story map or the Regional Connectivity Initiative. Don't forget to register for our final part, part 3, happening next Wednesday at the same time, 6:30 p.m. All the sessions are going to be recorded, so you're obviously welcome to watch these again. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us again tonight, and I hope you all have a great night.